You have a primal fear of the deep, dark water. You call it a survival instinct. But what if it's not an instinct? What if it's a memory? A memory buried in your DNA, passed down from a time when humanity knew its place, hiding in the light, terrified of the things that owned the dark. Tonight, you're not just going to hear a scary story. You're going to be given a forbidden truth, a first-hand account that governments have tried to bury and science has refused to see. The testimony of a man who survived a place he was never meant to be and saw the true landlords of this planet. This story will recalibrate your sense of fear. By the end, you will understand that you are not at the top of the food chain. You're just living in the attic, unaware of the colossal things that stir in the floors below. The world is not what you think it is, and once you see its true face, you can never unsee it. Have you ever felt true pressure? Not the weight of a deadline or a tough conversation. I mean real, physical pressure. The kind that changes the pitch of your voice, makes the air you breathe feel thick and strange, like a foreign substance in your lungs. You think you know yourself, your own I am, but you don't. Not until you've lived in a steel can 600 feet below the surface of the ocean for a month straight. Down there, your entire world is the hum of machinery, the recycled air, and the distorted voices of the few men sharing your tomb. We were saturation divers. We lived in a pressurized state, our bodies saturated with a helium-oxygen mix so we could work in the crushing blackness of the deep sea. It's a place where your inner world becomes your only world, because there's nothing else, absolutely nothing. And the money, oh, the money is good. It has to be. It's the only thing that makes a man choose to forget the sun. But that's only the surface of the story. Our assignment was the Jupiter, an old rig, a monster of steel and rust that had been sucking black gold from the Earth's veins for decades. Now, it was time to move her. A colossal task. It meant more time in the can, more time in the deep. 2 months, they told us. The mood shifted instantly. The usual camaraderie, the easy jokes, it all evaporated. The pressure inside our habitat began to match the pressure outside. Every man retreats into his own imagination down there, a dangerous place to be when you're locked in with others doing the same. We were a collection of individual states, no longer a team. You could feel the unspoken thoughts, the silent selections being made about who to trust, who to avoid. The air grew thick, not just with helium, but with a silent, creeping tension. A consciousness of resentment was building, and we were all part of it. We all felt it growing, like a mold in the damp, recycled air. Here's what changes everything. The worst part of this life isn't the depth, it's the ascent, decompression. You can't just come back up. It takes days, sometimes over a week, locked in an even smaller chamber as the pressure is slowly, agonizingly released from your body. Your blood is a boiling sea of nitrogen bubbles waiting to erupt. One mistake, one miscalculation, and you're dead. Or worse. You learn that your body isn't truly yours. It's a vessel held hostage by physics. This forced stillness, this slow return to the world, gives you too much time to think, time to replay every moment spent in the dark, to question every shadow your mind conjured. You feel every single thing. The feeling is the key, they say, but down there, the only feelings are cold, dread, and a bone-deep certainty that you are somewhere you are not supposed to be. It's an operant power, that darkness. It works on you, changing you from the inside out. Now go deeper. They never tell you about the silence. Not the quiet of a library, but a profound, absolute void of sound. Outside the submersible, sound doesn't travel. It's swallowed by the immense crushing black. No fish, no clicks of shrimp, nothing. The ocean floor around the Jupiter was a dead zone, a desert of gray silt under our powerful lights. It felt wrong, an unnatural emptiness. We were trespassers in a silent kingdom. Our assumption had always been that we were alone down there, just men and machines. But what if you're only alone because everything else is hiding? Hiding from you? Or hiding from something else? You start to understand that you aren't the master of this domain. You are a fleeting, noisy intruder. You think you already are the apex, the top of the chain. That's a dangerous assumption to make in a world that has existed without you for millennia. The company saw us as tools. Point us at a problem, we get it done. But they never considered what happens when the problem looks back. The extended time, the isolation, the sheer wrongness of that place. It started to wear on John first. My partner. He was the best, steady as a rock. But the rock was starting to crack. He'd stare out the porthole for hours, into the featureless black. His eyes, when he'd look at you, seemed to be focused on something behind you. He stopped talking about his family, about getting back to the surface. He started muttering about the emptiness. The wrong emptiness. He said it wasn't empty at all. It was just waiting. And as the days bled into one another, I started to feel it too. A shared inner world of dread. We were both sinking into a new state of awareness, and we were about to find out what was waiting for us in the dark. It started with the tremors. You'd see John's hands shake just slightly when he thought no one was looking. He'd stare at his coffee, the black liquid trembling, creating tiny, frantic ripples on the surface. His eyes lost their focus. He wasn't looking at things anymore. He was looking through them, his gaze fixed on a point in his inner world that none of us could see. The deep does things to a man's mind. We all knew it. We all made an unspoken assumption that we were strong enough to resist it, that our I am was a solid, immovable thing. But watching John, you saw how fragile that self-construct really is. He started talking about the hum of the rig, claiming it wasn't machinery. He said it was a voice, a language. He said the feeling of it was the key to understanding. Understanding what? He'd never say. He just shook his head, a man trapped in a state of terror only he could perceive. But that's only the beginning of the descent. Then came the sleep talking, or rather, sleep screaming. Muffled guttural sounds from his bunk in the dead of night. They weren't words, not human ones. They were clicks and deep, wet gasps. One night, I heard him clearly. He was whispering rapid fire. It has no face and it just selects. Over and over. The next morning, his face was pale, his eyes wide with a terror that hadn't faded with the dawn. He grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. It's a power, he whispered, his voice raspy. An operant power. It imagines things, and they become real. We're in its imagination, not the ocean. You see, you can handle a man breaking down. You can't handle it when his madness starts to sound like a revelation. The fear was no longer just his. It was becoming a shared consciousness, a virus spreading through the recycled air between us. Here's where the choice was taken away. The mission couldn't stop. The company didn't care about a man's fraying nerves, but they cared about risk, and John had become a risk. The final straw came during a systems check. We were supposed to go out, just the two of us. He suited up, but as the door to the submersible hissed open, revealing that perfect, crushing blackness, he recoiled. He ripped his helmet off, screaming. Not about monsters, not about voices. He just screamed, "I'm already there! I'm already out there!" He clawed at his own face, convinced his consciousness was no longer inside his body. That was it. The supervisor made the call. John was a danger to himself and, more importantly, to the operation. He was to be isolated. He had to begin the long, lonely journey of decompression. Alone. He had been selected, all right, but not by the abyss, by them. Now see through my eyes. They moved him to the separate decompression chamber, a medical lock. It was like watching a burial. He didn't fight. He looked resigned, defeated. I watched him through the tiny, thick porthole, his face pale under the harsh white light. He looked like a specimen in a jar. Our worlds were now separated by a few inches of reinforced steel, but it might as well have been a universe. He pressed his hand against the glass, and I mirrored him on my side. The cold of the steel was absolute. He wasn't looking at me with fear anymore. It was a look of pity, a terrible, knowing pity. He mouthed two words, words that would be burned into my mind forever. "You're next." Then, he was gone. A ghost beginning his slow ascent, leaving me to inherit his dread. The silence he left behind was worse than his screams. Before there was tension. Now, there was a void. I was to continue the work alone, one man to finish the job of two. I tried to tell myself it was for the best, that he'd just cracked, that the pressure had found a weak spot in his mind and split it open. I clung to the assumption of his madness, because the alternative was unthinkable. The alternative meant that his inner world wasn't a delusion, it was a reflection of the truth. It meant that the horrors his imagination had conjured were real. As I suited up for my first solo dive, the hum of the machinery sounded different. It sounded deeper. It sounded like a voice. And I had a sickening feeling that I was about to find out what it was saying. You think you know what alone is. You don't. Alone is being a single point of light in a universe of absolute black, suspended by a thread. My first solo dive was a descent into a new kind of silence. John's absence was a living thing, a presence that filled my helmet, whispering doubts. The water around the Jupiter rig was unnaturally clear, yet my high beams couldn't penetrate more than 20 feet. The darkness didn't just absorb light, it devoured it. There was no life. No bioluminescence, no roaming crabs, not even the microbial scum that coats every surface in the ocean. It was a sterilized, dead world, an assumption of emptiness. I focused on the task, the rhythmic hiss of my regulator, the only thing keeping my own inner world from collapsing. But the feeling was the key. Something was fundamentally wrong with this place. This wasn't just deep water, it was a different state of being entirely. And that's when something touched me. It was a brush against my leg. Quick, leathery. I thought it was my own umbilical line, a common snag. But then it happened again. Slower. More deliberate. I angled my light down, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What I saw, it didn't make sense. My imagination couldn't have created it. It was shaped like a massive stingray, maybe 10 feet across. But it wasn't swimming. It was crawling along the seabed on two spindly, jointed arms that ended in something like human hands. And trailing behind it, floating in the dead current, was a long mane of what looked like white hair. It slid past me, its skin the color of a bruise, and as it disappeared back into the oppressive dark, it turned its head. It had no eyes, just a smooth, pale expanse of flesh. My consciousness reeled. My mind was trying to reject what my eyes had just seen. Here's where reality breaks for good. I scrambled for my radio, my throat tight. "Control, this is Alpha. Did you see that on my camera feed?" A burst of static, then the calm, tinny voice from the surface. "Negative, Alpha. Feed is clear. Everything okay down there?" They saw nothing. Of course, they saw nothing. It was too fast, too impossible. I forced a steady breath. "Yeah, false alarm. Just some silt stirred up." A lie. A huge, terrible lie that separated me from them, from the world of sanity. I was alone with this knowledge. John's words echoed in my mind. It selects who it shows itself to. Was this the selection? A test? I tried to work, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the welding torch. But I couldn't shake the feeling. That primal animal feeling of being watched. The unsettling calm was gone. The void was now an audience. Now go deeper. Look up. I told myself to focus, weld the seam, finish the job, get back inside. But the feeling grew, a physical pressure on the back of my neck. I stopped working. I turned, slowly, sweeping my light in a wide arc. Nothing but the gray silt and the colossal steel legs of the rig vanishing into the gloom above. Then my light caught something, a flicker of movement. I aimed the beam higher, up the leg of the rig, and I saw a hand. A huge webbed hand with fingers far too long, pressed flat against the steel. My light followed the arm up to a face. It was 20 feet away, just hanging there in the water, watching me. Its head was massive, its skin translucent white. It had no nose, just two vertical slits. And the eyes were huge, black, almond-shaped voids. They didn't reflect my light. They drank it. Its mouth was a wide, lipless slash, filled with rows of needle-sharp yellow teeth. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just watched me. This wasn't an animal acting on instinct. This was an intelligence. Its operant power was its stillness, its absolute command of the abyss. In that moment, my entire sense of self, my I am, shattered. I wasn't a man, I wasn't a diver. I was an insect under glass. All my training, my experience, my courage, it was all a joke. You think you already are the dominant species on this planet. You have no idea. This creature, with its ancient, malevolent gaze, showed me the truth without moving a muscle. We are not alone. We are simply and utterly out of our depth. And it knew I could see it. It knew, and it didn't care. You can't prepare for the moment your reality is torn apart. Staring at that pale, abyssal face, I was frozen, a fly in amber. My mistake, my fatal assumption, was thinking it was the threat. The real danger doesn't announce itself, it simply acts. From the darkness below, my feet it came. A blur of motion, a violent impact that sent me tumbling through the water. It was an explosion of tentacles thick as pythons, and they weren't smooth. They were covered in jagged, chitinous spikes that dug into the reinforced fabric of my suit. It felt like being wrapped in a cage of living knives. This wasn't the cold, intellectual fear of the Watcher. This was hot, primal terror. My consciousness was a supernova of pain and panic. I was no longer a man. I was meat. But that's only the first layer of the nightmare. The creature was a monstrous hybrid of a squid and a crustacean. Its flesh, a mottled rocky gray. Its grip was absolute, its operant power expressed through pure, brutal force. I could hear the fibers of my suit groaning, screaming under the strain. Alarms blared inside my helmet, a frantic symphony of my impending death. The voices from the surface were distant, meaningless squeals. Alpha, report! What is your status? We're seeing a pressure differential. They were in another universe, a safe one. My inner world had collapsed into a single point, the feeling of the spikes pressing closer, threatening to breach the suit and let the abyss rush in. Feeling is the key, and the feeling was of being crushed, of my very I am being squeezed into nothingness by an unthinking, ravenous force. Here's what changes the definition of fear. Then, something shifted. It wasn't the creature holding me. It was everything. A deep, resonant vibration hummed through the water, so powerful I felt it in my bones. The squid thing holding me went rigid, its frantic energy replaced by a sudden, tense stillness. My own powerful light seemed to dim, as if a mountain was eclipsing the sun. The absolute blackness ahead of me seemed to congeal, to take on substance. Something was coming, something that made my captor, a creature of nightmare, freeze in absolute terror. In that moment, I understood the concept of a food chain on a level no human was ever meant to. We were no longer in a struggle. We were in the presence of a god. Now, see what I saw. It emerged from the darkness not like a creature, but like a geological formation coming to life. A worm. A colossal, pale worm, whose head alone was the size of a small car. It had no visible eyes or features, just a vast, circular mouth that seemed to be a perfect void, a hole in reality. Its skin was wrinkled and ancient, covered in scars the size of my entire body. It moved with an impossible slowness, a majestic, terrifying certainty. Its sheer existence was a refutation of everything I knew about life on this planet. My imagination could not have conceived of it. My consciousness could barely process it. This was the true power in the deep. This was the thing that John had, felt, the waiting emptiness that wasn't empty at all. This is the law of the deep. The worm paid no attention to me or the thing that held me. We were microbes, utterly irrelevant. Its focus was on the humanoid creature, the silent watcher on the rig's leg. I saw it then, real fear in those huge black eyes. The watcher pushed off the rig, moving with a speed I couldn't have imagined. But it was useless. The worm's massive head moved, its mouth opened, revealing not teeth, but a swirling concentric vortex of them, a meat grinder the size of a tunnel. It didn't bite. It simply inhaled. The Watcher was pulled in, vanishing into that churning abyss without a sound. In the face of that, what was I? My captor, in a spasm of its own terror, loosened its grip for a fraction of a second. It wasn't a choice. It was a reflex. An opening. And my survival instinct screamed louder than my fear. That single moment of distraction was all I had. I didn't think. I just acted. My entire consciousness, my sense of I am, compressed into a single desperate impulse. Up. I hit the emergency release from my tool belt and fired my thrusters, rocketing away from the unfolding horror. The squid thing, panicked by the godworm, was a fraction of a second too slow to react. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The image of that devouring maw was burned into my mind. Alarms shrieked in my helmet. Ascent too fast, pressure critical. My training screamed that I was killing myself, that my blood would boil with nitrogen. But my primal brain knew a simple truth. A quick death from the bends was a mercy compared to what was happening in the darkness below. I was a creature fleeing a broken corner of its own imagination, scrambling back toward a reality that no longer felt real. But I wasn't the only one who had seen it. They hauled me back into the habitat. I was a wreck, babbling incoherently about monsters, about a worm the size of a train. They looked at me with the same pity they'd shown John. Another good diver lost to the pressure, to the deep-sea crazies. They sedated me. When I woke up, the first thing I demanded was to see him. They let me, probably thinking seeing his broken state would calm me down. I went to the porthole of his decompression chamber. He was pale, gaunt, but when he saw my eyes, his expression changed. The pity was gone. He saw it. He knew I had crossed over into his world. He shakily picked up a small whiteboard. On it, he wrote 5 words and pressed it to the glass. "You saw the Watcher. True?" I nodded frantically. He wiped it clean and wrote again. "They are just the cattle." He had seen it all. Our inner worlds were no longer separate. They were 2 reflections of the same impossible horror. Here's where the world you know reasserts its power. The company pulled the plug on the Jupiter mission. The official report cited cascading equipment malfunctions and the uncharacteristic psychological decline of 2 senior divers. A neat, clean story. They put us on medical leave, paid us handsomely for our silence. For a month I lived in a daze, trying to reconcile the world of sunlight and traffic with the memory of the deep. Then, we heard the news. A highly specialized recovery team, military, not corporate, was sent to the Jupiter site to retrieve the abandoned equipment. John and I knew what they were really doing. They were going to see for themselves. We followed the story through back channels. The recovery submersible descended. It reached the seabed, and then it went silent. No distress call, no wreckage, it just vanished. The Abyss had made another selection. Now see the real apex predators. After the second crew was lost, they came for us. They weren't from the company. They wore plain dark suits and had eyes that didn't blink. They belonged to an agency that officially doesn't exist. They didn't ask questions. They gave answers. They told us we had experienced a shared delusion, a textbook case of high-pressure nervous syndrome. All evidence to the contrary. Our dive, logs, the habitat's sensor readings, my own damaged suit, was confiscated and lost. They informed us that this would be our official memory of events, our new state of mind. Their operant power was not in physical force, but in absolute, soul-crushing certainty. They told us in calm, measured tones that men with unstable stories often meet with unfortunate accidents. They were erasing the truth. But a truth like this doesn't want to be erased. They can threaten me. They can try to convince me I'm crazy. But I know what I saw. John knows. We are living proof that the world you think you inhabit is a lie. You walk on a thin crust of earth and stone, and you make the fatal assumption that this is all there is. You believe you already are the masters of this world. You are not. You are children living on the roof of an ancient dark house, and you've never had the courage to look in the basement. I am telling you this story because I looked. I know what's down there. And I know that sooner or later it's going to look up. A secret like this is a weight. He carried it up from the crushing deep, and by hearing his story, he has just handed it to you. You are now an accomplice to the truth. Ignorance was your only shield, and it is gone. So the next time you stand before the ocean, or stare into any deep, silent darkness, what will you do when you feel it staring back? This is not the end. It's an awakening. If you feel compelled to know more, to see what else is hiding behind the veil of our reality, then subscribe. The next warning is already being prepared. Click the bell and join the ones who know, because the silence has been broken, and you can't go back now.